I never imagined that a stack of firewood and a rusted old trailer would turn into the biggest legal nightmare Montgomery County, Maryland had ever seen. But here we are. My name is Oliver Oakes, and I have been living in the Pine Ridge community for 6 years now. It is a decent neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes, located just outside of Rockville. The houses are not mansions, but they are comfortable middle-class homes where families raise their kids and retirees enjoy their golden years. I bought my place back in 2019, a 3-bedroom ranch with a decent-sized yard and a detached garage that I converted into a workshop. I work as a contractor, specializing in custom cabinetry and woodworking, which means I need space for equipment, materials, and yes, sometimes a trailer. The trouble started on January 8, 2025. Maryland was getting hammered by one of those polar vortex events that meteorologists love to talk about with dramatic hand gestures on the evening news. Temperatures were supposed to drop to -5 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills making it feel like -20. This was the kind of cold that kills people, especially the elderly and vulnerable. The kind of cold that bursts pipes and turns your house into an icebox if your heating system cannot keep up. I had been preparing for this cold snap like any reasonable person would. I stocked up on groceries, made sure my furnace was running smoothly, and most importantly, I loaded up my old utility trailer with firewood. My house has a wood-burning fireplace that I use as a supplemental heat source during extreme weather. It saves on the electric bill and provides a backup if the power goes out, which happens more often than you would think in our area during winter storms. The trailer itself was nothing fancy. It was a single-axle utility trailer I bought used about 4 years ago. The thing was probably 20 years old, with faded paint and some surface rust, but it was mechanically sound. I kept it registered and insured, and it had a valid license plate. I had parked it in my driveway, right next to my pickup truck, loaded with about half a cord of seasoned oak and hickory that I had purchased from a local farm. On the morning of January 9th, I woke up to my phone buzzing with a text message from my neighbor, Gerald, who lived 3 houses down. The message simply said, "Dude, did you know your trailer is gone?" I bolted out of bed, threw on my boots and coat, and rushed outside. Sure enough, the trailer was missing, just gone. There were no tire marks in the frost, no signs of a break-in or theft. Just an empty spot where 2,000 pounds of firewood and a trailer had been sitting 12 hours earlier. My first thought was theft. We had experienced a few car break-ins in the neighborhood over the past year, so it was not outside the realm of possibility. I immediately called the Montgomery County Police non-emergency line to report it. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would come by to take a statement. While I was waiting for the police, I decided to check my doorbell camera footage. I had installed a Ring doorbell the previous summer, and while it did not have a direct view of where the trailer was parked, it might have caught something. I scrolled through the footage from the previous evening and found exactly what I was looking for, though it was not what I expected. At 11:47 p.m. on January 8th, a tow truck had pulled up to my house. 2 men got out, hooked up my trailer, and drove off with it. The whole operation took less than 5 minutes. They were not sneaking around or acting suspicious. They moved with the efficiency of people who did this every day. Because they did. This was a legitimate towing company. But why would a towing company take my trailer from my own driveway? The answer came about 20 minutes later when I checked my mailbox and found a citation notice from the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. The notice, dated January 8th, stated that I was in violation of Section 7, Subsection 4, paragraph C of the HOA bylaws, which prohibited commercial vehicles, trailers, boats, recreational vehicles, or similar equipment from being parked in driveways or visible from the street for more than 24 hours. The citation went on to say that after numerous violations and warnings, my trailer had been removed and impounded at my expense. I stood there in my driveway, in negative-degree weather, holding this piece of paper and feeling my blood pressure spike. Numerous violations. I had never received a single warning. Not a letter, not an email, not even a passive-aggressive note stuck to my door. Nothing. The officer arrived about 30 minutes later. Her name was Officer Ramirez, and she listened patiently as I explained the situation and showed her the doorbell footage. She made notes and asked to see the HOA citation. "So this was not theft," she said, stating the obvious. "This was a civil matter between you and your HOA. You will need to contact them to retrieve your property." "But I never got any warnings," I protested. "They cannot just take my property without notice, can they?" Officer Ramirez gave me a sympathetic look that told me she had dealt with HOA disputes before. "That is something you would need to discuss with them or potentially an attorney. From a criminal standpoint, if the HOA authorized the tow and the towing company followed proper procedures, there is no theft here. I am sorry." After she left, I immediately tried calling the HOA management office. It was 9:30 a.m. on a Thursday, so they should have been open. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and demanding to know where my trailer was and how I could get it back. While waiting for a callback, I dug out my copy of the HOA bylaws. I had received them when I bought the house, but had honestly never read them thoroughly. Most of it was standard stuff about lawn maintenance, exterior paint colors, and noise ordinances. I found Section 7, Subsection 4, Paragraph C, which did indeed prohibit what my citation said it prohibited. However, I also found Section 12, which outlined the enforcement procedures. According to the bylaws, residents were supposed to receive a written warning for first offenses, followed by a $50 fine for second offenses, a $100 fine for third offenses, and only after that could the HOA take necessary measures to remedy the violation at the homeowner's expense. There was also a clear procedure for how warnings and fines were to be delivered, either by certified mail or by hand delivery with photo documentation. I had received none of this. 0 warnings, 0 fines, just straight to impounding my property. By noon, the HOA office still had not called me back. I tried calling again. Voicemail. I sent an email. No response. I was starting to get seriously worried because the temperature was continuing to drop and I needed that firewood. Around 2 p.m., I decided to drive over to the HOA office myself. The Pine Ridge HOA managed our community and 2 others in the area, and their office was in a small commercial plaza about 3 miles away. When I arrived, the door was locked and the lights were off, despite the hours posted on the door clearly stating they should be open until 5 p.m. I called the number again from the parking lot. I could hear the phone ringing inside the office, but nobody answered. Frustrated and freezing, I went back home and started doing some research. I found the towing company's name from the truck in my doorbell footage and called them. The woman who answered confirmed they had my trailer. "That will be $385 to release it," she said cheerfully. $385. For what? Towing fee is $175. Storage is $35 per day, and there is a $175 administrative fee. You have had it here for 1 day, so that is $385. I need to speak with someone about this. The HOA had no right to tow it. I never received any warnings. Sir, you will need to take that up with the HOA. We were hired to do a job and we did it. If you want your trailer back, the fee is $385. Can I at least get my firewood off of it? There is about $1,000 worth of firewood on that trailer, and I need it for heat. Sorry, sir. Once a vehicle or trailer is impounded, nothing can be removed until all fees are paid and it is released. I hung up and resisted the urge to throw my phone across the room. This was insane. It was one of the coldest days of the year. They had stolen my firewood, and they were holding it for ransom. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. Not a phone call, not an apology, just a terse email from someone named Patricia Pemberton, who identified herself as the HOA president. The email read, "Dear Mr. Oakes, your trailer was removed from your property due to repeated violations of community bylaws. As per Section 7.4c, trailers are not permitted to be stored in driveways or visible from the street. You may retrieve your trailer from Ace Towing by paying the applicable fees. Future violations will result in additional fines. Regards, Patricia Pemberton, HOA President." I immediately replied, keeping my tone as professional as I could manage. "Miss Pemberton, I never received any warnings or previous citations regarding my trailer. According to Section 12 of the bylaws, warnings and fines must be issued before property can be impounded. Additionally, I need the firewood on that trailer for heat during this extreme cold weather. Please advise how we can resolve this immediately." Her response came back within 5 minutes. Our records show multiple violations dating back to November 2024. All warnings were sent via email to the address on file. This matter is closed. I checked my email archives. There was nothing. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. I even did a search for any emails from the HOA in the past year. The last email I had received from them was in March 2024 about a community yard sale. Either they were lying or they had the wrong email address on file. Either way, it did not matter. My firewood was locked up. I was out $385 if I wanted it back. And the temperature outside was now sitting at a balmy 2 degrees Fahrenheit. I spent that evening burning what little firewood I had left in my garage, maybe 20 pieces, and cranking my thermostat up to 72 to make sure the house stayed warm. My electric bill was going to be astronomical, but there was no choice. The next morning, January 10th, I drove to the towing company and paid the $385 with my credit card, each swipe feeling like a knife in my gut. They released my trailer and I drove home with my firewood intact. At least there was that. But I was not done with this. Not by a long shot. I spent the weekend documenting everything. I printed out email records, took screenshots, saved the doorbell footage, and made copies of the HOA bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted. On Monday morning, I took a personal day off work and went to see an attorney. The law firm of Randolph and Associates was in downtown Rockville, and I had found them through a Google search for attorneys specializing in HOA disputes. I met with a lawyer named David Randolph, a middle-aged man with graying hair and the weary expression of someone who had seen too many HOA horror stories. I laid out everything that had happened. He listened, took notes, and reviewed my documentation. "You have a good case," he finally said. They clearly violated their own enforcement procedures. The problem is, even if you sue and win, you are looking at months of litigation and legal fees that could run into the thousands of dollars. You might recover your $385, maybe some additional damages, but is it worth it? So they just get away with it. Unfortunately, that is how most HOA disputes end. They know most people cannot afford to fight them, so they do whatever they want. I left his office feeling defeated. He was right. I could sue, spend thousands of dollars, and maybe win a few hundred back. It was not worth it financially. But as I drove home, I started thinking about something else. Something David Randolph had mentioned in passing. He said that HOAs, despite acting like little dictatorships, were still bound by the same laws and regulations as everyone else. They could not just do whatever they wanted without consequences. That got me thinking about the community building. The Pine Ridge Community Building was a central feature of our neighborhood. It was a 2-story structure that sat on a 3-acre parcel of common land, right in the center of the development. The building had a large multi-purpose room used for community events, a small gym, a kitchen, and several meeting rooms. The HOA board held their meetings there, and residents could rent it out for parties and gatherings. More importantly, the building was heated by a natural gas system that I had installed myself 3 years ago. Back in 2022, the community building had been heated by an ancient oil furnace that finally gave up the ghost during a cold snap, ironically enough. The HOA had put out a request for bids to replace it, and I had submitted a proposal to install a high-efficiency natural gas system. My bid was competitive, my work was guaranteed, and I had all the proper licenses and certifications. The job took about 3 weeks, and I did it in January and February of 2022, working in that miserable building while it was basically unheated. I installed a new carrier gas furnace, ran new ductwork, upgraded the thermostat system, and even added zone controls so they could heat different parts of the building independently. It was a $28,000 job, and I did it right. Here is the thing, though. When I submitted my final invoice, the HOA dragged their feet on payment. They claimed there were issues with the work, which there were not. They demanded a third-party inspection, which I agreed to and which confirmed everything was up to code. They still delayed. After 2 months and multiple requests, I finally threatened to put a mechanic's lien on the property. That got their attention. They paid me, but not before Patricia Pemberton, the same woman who was now HOA president, had called me and chewed me out for threatening the community. What she did not know, and what I had not thought about in 3 years, was that I still had the master access code to the furnace system. Modern HVAC systems have lockable control panels with security codes to prevent tampering. When I installed the system, I set a master code, gave a secondary code to the HOA, and kept the master code for myself in case they ever needed service. They never called me for service, so I never thought about it again, until now. I want to be clear about something. What I was contemplating was not illegal, but it was definitely in a gray area. The system I installed belonged to the HOA. They had paid for it. But I also had a legitimate reason to access it, as the installer and someone who might be called for service. In fact, my contract with them technically included a 1-year warranty period, and while that had long expired, there was nothing in writing saying I could not access the system. On Tuesday, January 14th, I made my decision. The cold snap was continuing, with temperatures staying below 10 degrees. According to the weather forecast, this pattern would continue for at least another week. I drove to the community building around 10 p.m., when I knew it would be empty. The HOA board meetings were held on Wednesday evenings, and the building was not used much otherwise during the winter. I parked in the lot, walked around to the mechanical room entrance on the side of the building, and used my old key to unlock it. Yes, I still had a key. They had never asked for it back, and I had never thought to return it. The mechanical room was exactly as I had left it 3 years ago, just a bit dustier. The furnace was humming away, keeping the building at a comfortable 68 degrees. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, where I had saved the master access code, 7734. I keyed it into the control panel, and the system unlocked with a soft beep. I navigated through the menus and found the schedule settings. The system was programmed to maintain 68 degrees from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily and drop to 55 degrees overnight. I changed the settings. I set the system to maintain 45 degrees, 24 hours a day. That was cold enough to be uncomfortable and to make the building essentially unusable, but it was not cold enough to cause pipes to freeze or create any actual damage. I was angry, but I was not looking to commit vandalism. After making the changes, I locked the panel again with my master code, left the mechanical room, locked the door behind me, and drove home. My heart was pounding the entire time, but I also felt a sense of satisfaction. They wanted to play games with my property. Fine. Two could play that game. The next morning, I woke up to a series of texts in a neighborhood group chat. People were complaining that the community building was freezing. Apparently, someone had tried to use the gym at 6 a.m. and said it was like a meat locker. Others chimed in saying they had noticed it was cold the previous day too. Around noon, Patricia Pemberton posted in the group chat, "We are aware of the heating issue at the community building. A technician has been called and will resolve the issue shortly. Tonight's board meeting will be held as scheduled." I wondered who they had called. There were only 3 HVAC companies in the area that serviced commercial systems, and I knew people at all of them. Out of curiosity, I called my buddy Mike, who worked at Rockville Heating and Cooling. "Hey Mike, did you guys get a service call for the Pine Ridge Community Building?" "Yeah, actually. I am heading over there this afternoon." "Why?" "Just curious. I installed that system a few years back. What is the problem?" "They said it is not putting out heat." "Probably a thermostat issue or maybe the gas valve. Let me know what you find." Mike called me back around 4 p.m. and he was laughing. "Dude, there is nothing wrong with that system. It is working perfectly. It is just set to 45 degrees. I told the HOA lady she just needs to turn up the thermostat, but she said it is locked and she does not have the code." "What did you do?" "I gave her a quote for $350 to reset the system with a new code. She about lost her mind. Said she needed to talk to the board first." I thanked Mike and hung up, grinning. This was going exactly as I had hoped. That evening, I decided to attend the HOA board meeting. As a resident, I had every right to be there, and I wanted to see this play out in person. The meetings were open to all homeowners, though most people did not bother attending unless they had a specific issue. I arrived at 7 p.m., and the building was indeed cold. I could see my breath in the main room where the meeting was being held. About 15 people had shown up, most of them board members or people with agenda items. Everyone was wearing coats. Patricia Pemberton sat at the head of the table. A woman in her early 50s with short blonde hair and the kind of pinched expression that suggested she had been sucking on lemons her entire life. Sitting next to her was the vice president, a man named Donald Chen, and the treasurer, a woman named Margaret Foster. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately addressed the temperature issue. "As everyone can feel, we are experiencing technical difficulties with our heating system. We have had a technician evaluate it, and unfortunately, the cost to repair it is quite high. We will need to have a special assessment vote to fund the repair." "How much is the repair?" someone asked. The quote we received was $350, but there may be additional costs if there are underlying issues. The room erupted in complaints. $350 did not sound like much, but people were already paying monthly HOA fees. The idea of a special assessment for something as basic as heat was not going over well. I raised my hand. Patricia looked at me, and I saw recognition flash across her face. She knew exactly who I was. "Yes, Mr. Oakes," she said, her voice icy. "I am confused," I said, keeping my tone polite. "I installed that heating system 3 years ago, and it has a 20-year expected lifespan. What exactly is broken? The thermostat is locked, and we do not have the access code." "Did you try the code I gave you when I completed the installation?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "We no longer have that information. It was 3 years ago. So the system is not actually broken. It just needs to be unlocked." "That is correct. And you were quoted $350 just to unlock it." "That is what the technician said." I nodded slowly. "That seems excessive for something that takes about 2 minutes. I still have the master code since I installed the system. I could unlock it for free if you would like." The room went silent. Everyone was looking at Patricia, who looked like she had just swallowed a wasp. "That would not be appropriate," she said stiffly. "We need a licensed professional to handle it." "I am a licensed professional. I installed the system." "Nevertheless, we will be hiring an outside contractor." Another resident spoke up, an older man named Frank who lived on my street. "Hold on, Patricia. If Oliver can fix it for free, why would we pay someone $350? That is our dues money." "It is a matter of proper procedure," Patricia insisted. "Sounds like a matter of wasting money to me," Frank replied. Several other people murmured in agreement. Patricia was losing control of the room, and she knew it. "We will take this under advisement and vote on it at the next meeting." "When is the next meeting?" someone asked. 2 weeks from now." "So we are supposed to freeze for 2 weeks because you are too stubborn to let Oliver fix it." Frank was getting heated now, both figuratively and literally, since it was about 43 degrees in the room. I decided to twist the knife a bit. "For what it is worth, the system is currently set to maintain 45 degrees. That is well above freezing, so there is no risk of pipe damage. It is just going to be uncomfortable. Of course, if it were set back to a normal temperature, say 68 degrees, the building would warm up within about 3 hours." Patricia glared at me. She knew. Maybe she did not have proof, but she knew I had done this. "How do you know what temperature it is set to?" she demanded. "I saw the thermostat when I walked in," I said, which was true. The main thermostat was in the hallway, and while it was locked, it still displayed the set temperature. "It is right there for anyone to see." The meeting devolved from there. People argued about the heating, about special assessments, about HOA spending in general. Patricia tried to move on to other agenda items, but nobody cared. After about 45 minutes, she adjourned the meeting early, citing the uncomfortable conditions. As people filed out, Frank came up to me. "That was something else," he said, shaking his head. "Patricia has been a pain in the rear since she got elected president. She acts like she owns the place." "She is the one who had my trailer towed last week," I said. Frank's eyebrows went up. "The one with your firewood. I heard about that. That was ridiculous. I never got any warnings. She just had it towed." "That sounds about right. She did something similar to the Kowalskis last year. Fined them for having a bird feeder in their front yard. Said it was not approved outdoor decoration." As I drove home that night, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I had made my point. Patricia and the board were now dealing with the consequences of their actions, just like I had dealt with losing my firewood and $385. On the other hand, I knew this was not over. Patricia struck me as the kind of person who did not let things go. I was right. The next morning, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a law firm called Morrison and Associates. The letter stated that I was suspected of tampering with community property and demanded that I provide the access code to the heating system immediately. It also threatened legal action if I did not comply within 48 hours. I called David Randolph, my attorney, and read him the letter. "Did you tamper with the system?" he asked. "I adjusted the thermostat using the master code that I set when I installed the system. The HOA never asked for that code, and my contract did not require me to surrender it. Technically, I still have service access rights." David was quiet for a moment. "That is a creative argument, but I am not sure it would hold up in court. You adjusted their property without permission, even if you had the technical ability to do so. So what should I do? Give them the code?" "You made your point, and continuing to withhold it is just going to escalate things. They could sue you for damages, and even if you won, it would be expensive to defend." He was right, but I hated it. "Fine, I will give them the code." I called Patricia directly. She answered on the second ring. "This is Oliver Oakes," I said. "I received the letter from your attorney. I will give you the master code for the heating system." "Good," she said coldly. "What is it?" "Not so fast. I want something in exchange." "You are in no position to negotiate, Mr. Oakes." "Sure I am. You need that code, and I have it. Here is what I want. You reimburse me the $385 I had to pay to get my trailer back. You admit that you did not follow proper enforcement procedures, and you update your records with my correct email address so this does not happen again." Patricia laughed, an unpleasant sound. "Absolutely not. You are just going to give me that code, or I will sue you for everything you have." "Go ahead and sue me. In the meantime, enjoy your 45-degree building. I hear there is a kid's birthday party scheduled there this Saturday." "I am sure the parents will love that." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. I had just declared war on my HOA, and there was no going back now. Over the next few days, the situation escalated quickly. Patricia sent another letter, this one threatening immediate legal action. I responded through David Randolph, reiterating my conditions and adding that I would be filing a counterclaim for harassment and improper enforcement procedures. The community was starting to take sides. Some people thought I was being petty and should just give up the code. Others, like Frank and several of my neighbors, thought Patricia had overstepped and that I had every right to push back. On Friday, January 17th, Patricia made a mistake. She sent out a community-wide email using the HOA's official mailing list, in which she personally attacked me. The email was titled Community Update and included a paragraph that read, "Some residents have decided to hold the community hostage for their own petty grievances. Oliver Oakes, who installed our heating system, has refused to provide access codes and has sabotaged our community building during one of the coldest weeks of the year. This is unacceptable behavior, and the board is pursuing all legal remedies." The email went on to describe me as unprofessional, vindictive, and a danger to community welfare. This was a bridge too far. Sending out a community-wide email that personally attacked a resident with false accusations, no less, was defamation. I forwarded the email to David Randolph. "This is good for us," he said when I called him. "She has now committed libel in writing to hundreds of people. You have grounds for a defamation suit. What about her claim that I sabotaged the system? Did you damage anything?" "No. I just changed the temperature setting." "Then it is not sabotage. Sabotage implies destruction or damage. You adjusted a setting. At worst, it is unauthorized access, which is a civil matter, not criminal. So what do we do?" "I will draft a cease and desist letter and a formal demand for retraction. If she does not comply, we file suit for defamation and your original complaint about the trailer." David sent the letter that afternoon. In it, he demanded that Patricia issue a public retraction of her statements, reimburse me for the towing fees, and cease all harassment. He also informed her that adjusting a thermostat did not constitute sabotage, and that I had legitimate access rights as the system installer. Patricia's response came through her attorney on Monday. They rejected all demands and stated that they would be filing suit against me for intentional interference with community operations and seeking damages in excess of $10,000. I could not afford a prolonged legal battle. Even though I thought I was in the right, legal fees would eat me alive. I was seriously considering just giving them the code and walking away from the whole thing, losing my $385 and my pride in the process. Then something unexpected happened. The story went viral. Frank, my neighbor, had been following the whole saga with interest. Unbeknownst to me, he had recorded the board meeting on his phone, including the exchange between me and Patricia. He posted it to a community Facebook group, and someone else shared it to a Reddit forum dedicated to HOA horror stories. By Tuesday morning, the video had over 100,000 views. People were outraged by Patricia's attitude and the HOA's behavior. The comments section was full of people sharing their own HOA nightmare stories and expressing support for me. A local news station in Washington, D.C., picked up the story. On Tuesday evening, a reporter named Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News knocked on my door. "Mr. Oakes, I am Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7. I was hoping to talk to you about your dispute with your HOA." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay out of the spotlight, but another part of me thought that public pressure might be the only thing that would make Patricia back down. "Sure," I said. "Come in." We sat in my living room, and I told her the whole story. She took notes and asked good questions. She wanted to see the doorbell footage, the HOA bylaws, the citation, everything. I showed her all of it. "Would you be willing to do an on-camera interview?" she asked. "Will it help?" "It might. HOAs operate in the shadows because nobody pays attention to them. Once you shine a light on what they are doing, they often back down because they do not want the bad publicity." "Okay, let's do it." We filmed the interview in my driveway, with my house in the background. Jennifer asked me about the trailer, the firewood, the heating system, all of it. I kept my answers factual and avoided getting emotional, though it was difficult. "What do you want from the HOA?" she asked. "I just want them to admit they made a mistake and reimburse me for the money I had to pay, and I want them to follow their own rules going forward. They cannot just do whatever they want without consequences." The story aired on the Wednesday evening news. It was a 3-minute segment that laid out the entire situation, complete with the doorbell footage of my trailer being towed and clips from the board meeting. Jennifer Walsh did a great job presenting the facts and making it clear that the HOA had not followed its own procedures. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The news station's Facebook page was flooded with comments supporting me. People started showing up at the community building to protest, holding signs that said things like "HOAs are out of control" and "Give Oliver his money back." Patricia and the board went into crisis mode. On Thursday morning, I received a call from Donald Chen, the HOA vice president. "Oliver, this is Donald Chen. I wanted to reach out to you directly without the lawyers involved." "Okay," I said cautiously. "Look, I think this whole thing has gotten out of hand. Nobody wanted it to go this way. I personally think Patricia overreacted with the towing, and I did not agree with that email she sent out. So what are you proposing? How about this? The HOA reimburses you the $385. We issue a public apology and you give us the code to the heating system. We all move on." What about Patricia's defamatory email? We will send out a retraction. I will personally write it and make sure it is appropriate. I thought about it. This was basically what I had wanted from the beginning. Okay, but I want the apology and the retraction sent out before I give you the code. Deal. That afternoon, the HOA sent out a community-wide email. It was written by Donald, not Patricia, and it read, "Dear Pine Ridge residents, the board would like to address recent events regarding a dispute with resident Oliver Oakes. Upon review, we have determined that proper enforcement procedures were not followed when Mr. Oakes' trailer was towed. Specifically, required warnings and fines were not issued before the vehicle was impounded. We apologize to Mr. Oakes for this error and will be reimbursing him for all towing expenses. Additionally, a previous email sent by Board President Patricia Pemberton contained statements about Mr. Oakes that were inaccurate and inappropriate. We retract those statements and apologize for any harm caused. Going forward, the board is committed to following all bylaws and procedures consistently and fairly. Sincerely, the Pine Ridge HOA Board of Directors." An hour later, I received a check in the mail via courier for $385, along with a separate letter of apology from Donald. I called Donald back. "I got the check and the apology. The master code is 7734. The secondary code you had should still work too, but if you want to reset everything with new codes, you can do that through the system menu. Thank you, Oliver. And again, I am sorry this happened." The heating system was reset that evening and the community building returned to normal temperature. The protesters dispersed. The news cycle moved on to other stories, and I thought that was the end of it, but it was not. About a week later, on January 28th, I received a call from a lawyer I did not know. Her name was Zelda Wright, and she worked for the Maryland Attorney General's Office, Civil Division. "Mr. Oakes, I have been reviewing your case with the Pine Ridge HOA, and I have some questions for you." "Okay," I said, confused. "What kind of questions?" "We have been investigating the Pine Ridge HOA for potential violations of Maryland's Homeowners Association Act. Your situation brought them to our attention, but as we dug deeper, we found other issues. I was hoping you could help me understand how the board operates." Over the next hour, I told Zelda everything I knew about the HOA. She was particularly interested in the enforcement procedures and whether other residents had experienced similar problems. "We have received complaints from 17 other residents in your community," she said. "Everything from improper fines to violations of the Open Meetings Act. The board has been operating outside the law for at least 2 years. What happens now?" "We are going to be conducting a formal investigation. If we find violations, we can seek civil penalties against the board members personally, not just the HOA as an entity. I may need you to testify if this goes to a hearing. I will do whatever you need." Over the next 2 months, the Attorney General's investigation unfolded. It turned out that Patricia Pemberton and the previous board treasurer, who had resigned the year before, had been skimming money from the HOA's budget. Not a lot, maybe $15,000 total over 2 years, but it was embezzlement nonetheless. They had been using the money to pay for personal expenses and covering it up by inflating maintenance costs. The improper enforcement procedures, like what had happened to me, were part of a pattern designed to intimidate residents and prevent them from asking too many questions about the finances. On March 15, 2025, Patricia Pemberton and the former treasurer, a man named Richard Stoltz, were both arrested and charged with embezzlement and theft. The story made the local news again, this time with much more serious implications. The remaining board members, including Donald Chen, immediately resigned. The county appointed an interim management company to oversee the HOA while new elections were organized. I attended the hearing in May, where Patricia and Richard both pled guilty to reduced charges. Patricia was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution of $7,500. Richard got a similar sentence. Neither of them would serve jail time, but their reputations were destroyed. In June, the HOA held new elections. Frank, my neighbor, ran for president and won. One of his first acts was to review and reform all the enforcement procedures to make sure they actually followed the bylaws. He also established a financial oversight committee to prevent future embezzlement. As for me, I was just glad it was over. The whole ordeal had lasted about 5 months from start to finish, but it felt like years. I learned a lot about HOAs, about standing up for yourself, and about how systems can be corrupted by people with unchecked power. The irony was not lost on me that the whole thing started over a trailer full of firewood during a cold snap. If Patricia had just followed the rules, issued a warning, and let me move my trailer to the backyard, none of this would have happened. Instead, her arrogance and need for control had led to criminal charges and the complete collapse of the HOA board. In July, I got a letter from Zelda Wright at the Attorney General's office. She thanked me for my cooperation with the investigation and informed me that the state was instituting new oversight requirements for HOAs in Maryland. All HOAs would now be required to submit annual financial reports, and enforcement procedures would be standardized across the state. "Your case helped make this happen," she wrote. "Thank you for standing up for yourself and for your community." I framed that letter and hung it in my workshop, right next to my contractor's license. It serves as a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing is difficult, expensive, and stressful, but it is worth it. The community is better now. Frank is doing a good job as HOA president, and the new board is transparent and responsive. People actually show up to board meetings now because they trust that their voices will be heard. The community building gets used more often, for everything from kids' parties to senior exercise classes. As for my trailer, it sits in my backyard now, out of sight from the street. I still use it for firewood and the occasional contractor job. Every time I see it, I think about that cold January night when Patricia decided to have it towed, and I smile. Sometimes the little guy wins. It does not happen often, and it usually takes more effort than it should, but when it does happen, it feels pretty good. This past winter was mild, thankfully, and I did not need as much firewood. But I keep a good supply on hand just in case. You never know when you might need it, especially when you cannot trust your HOA to follow their own rules. The best part of the whole experience was the relationships I built with my neighbors. Before all this happened, I was friendly with people but did not really know them. Now I have actual friends on my street. We have barbecues in the summer, help each other with yard work, and look out for one another. Frank and I have become particularly close. He is retired, spent his career as an accountant, and has a dry sense of humor that I appreciate. He jokes that I am the only person he knows who started a war with his HOA over firewood and won. "You are a legend in HOA dispute forums," he told me one day while we were grilling in his backyard. "I saw someone reference your story on Reddit last week. They called you the Firewood Warrior." I laughed. "That is ridiculous. Hey, own it. You did what most people are too scared to do. You stood up to a bully and won." He was right, I suppose. Patricia was a bully, using her position to push people around and enrich herself in the process. The fact that she got caught and faced consequences was justice, even if those consequences were not as severe as they could have been. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had just paid the $385 and let it go. I would have been out the money, Patricia would have continued her schemes, and the HOA would have kept operating outside the law. Other residents would have been victimized, and nobody would have done anything about it. But I did not let it go. I pushed back, and in pushing back, I exposed a much larger problem. That is something I can feel good about. On the anniversary of the trailer incident, January 9th, 2026, Frank organized a small gathering at my house. He called it the first annual Firewood celebration. About 20 neighbors showed up. We lit a bonfire in my backyard, using wood from my infamous trailer, and we roasted marshmallows and told stories. It was ridiculous and perfect, and exactly the kind of thing that never would have happened before all this started. These people were not just neighbors anymore. They were a community, a real one, not the fake manufactured community that Patricia and her board had tried to impose from the top down. As I stood by the fire that night, watching people laugh and enjoy themselves, I realized something. This was what community was supposed to be about. Not rules and fines and enforcement, but people coming together voluntarily because they genuinely liked and cared about each other. The HOA still existed, of course. It had to, for legal and practical reasons. But under Frank's leadership, it had become what it should have always been. A service organization that maintained common areas and organized community events, not a mini-government trying to control every aspect of people's lives. The new board had even revised the trailer rule. Now residents were allowed to park trailers in their driveways for up to 7 days, and if you needed an extension, you just had to send a quick email to the board. No fines, no threats, just reasonable communication between reasonable people. I think about Patricia sometimes and wonder if she learned anything from the experience. Probably not. People like her rarely do. But at least she cannot hurt anyone else in our community anymore, and that is what matters. The whole saga taught me several important lessons. First, documentation is everything. If I had not had that doorbell footage, the HOA bylaws, and written records of everything, I would not have had a case. Second, standing up for yourself is important even when it is hard. Third, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Once the media got involved and people saw what was happening, the HOA could not hide anymore. But the biggest lesson was about community. Real community is not imposed through rules and regulations. It grows organically when people are treated with respect and given the freedom to be good neighbors. My life has mostly returned to normal now. I work on my cabinetry projects, spend time with my girlfriend Sarah, who I started dating last summer, and enjoy my house and neighborhood. The drama of the HOA dispute feels like a distant memory, though it was really just a year ago. Every once in a while, someone will recognize me from the news story or online. Usually it is at the hardware store or the grocery store, and they will say something like, "Hey, are you the Firewood guy?" I always smile and nod, and they inevitably tell me their own HOA horror story. Turns out everyone has one. The legal reforms that came out of my case are probably the most lasting impact. HOAs across Maryland are now required to follow standardized procedures for enforcement, maintain transparent finances, and allow homeowners an appeals process before any property is impounded or significant fines are levied. It is not perfect, but it is better than it was. I still have the old trailer. It has become something of a mascot for me and my business. I put a small sign on it that says Oaks Custom Cabinetry with my phone number. It is free advertising, and it serves as a conversation starter. Plus, Every time I look at it, I remember that I stood up for myself and won. The funny thing is, the whole incident ended up being good for my business. After the news story aired, I got several calls from people wanting to hire me for projects. They said they liked my integrity and the fact that I stood up to bullies. I ended up having my best year ever in 2025, financially speaking. Sarah, my girlfriend, thinks the whole story is hilarious. She did not live in the area when it all happened, so she got to hear about it secondhand when we started dating. She jokes that she is dating a local celebrity, the infamous Firewood warrior. "You know what I love about that whole situation?" she said to me one evening. "You did not do it for money or fame. You did it because it was the right thing to do and because someone needed to stand up to that woman." She was right. If I had been thinking purely strategically, I probably would have just paid the $385 and moved on with my life. It would have been easier and cheaper. But sometimes things are not about strategy or cost-benefit analysis. Sometimes they are about principle. The community is thriving now in ways it never did under Patricia's regime. Frank organized a neighborhood improvement committee that works on projects like maintaining the walking trails, organizing social events, and even starting a community garden. All volunteer-based, no mandates, no fines. Just people doing things because they want to make the neighborhood better. I volunteer on the Architectural Review Committee now, which is ironic given my history with the HOA. But under the new structure, the committee is advisory only. We help homeowners understand the rules and work with them to find solutions that look good and comply with regulations. We do not issue fines or threaten people. It is amazing how much more cooperative people are when you treat them with respect. Looking back on everything that happened, from that cold January morning when I discovered my trailer was missing to the day Patricia was arrested, I am struck by how quickly things escalated and how many lives were affected. My decision to push back against an unjust towing led to exposing embezzlement, reforming state law, and ultimately creating a better community for everyone. Would I do it again? Absolutely. It was stressful, expensive, and time-consuming, but it was worth it. Not just for me, but for all the other residents who were being taken advantage of and did not have the resources or knowledge to fight back. The last time I saw Patricia was at her sentencing hearing in May 2025. She did not look at me or acknowledge me in any way. She stood before the judge, listened to the sentence, and left the courtroom with her attorney. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The power and authority she had wielded so carelessly were gone, and without them, she was just a middle-aged woman who had made some very bad choices. I did not feel triumphant watching her sentence. Mostly, I felt sad that it had to come to that. If she had just been a decent person, followed the rules she was supposed to enforce, and treated residents with basic respect, none of it would have happened. She would still be HOA president. I would still have my $385, and the community would be just fine. But that is not how it played out. Her arrogance and corruption led to her downfall, and in a weird way, that led to positive changes for everyone else. The community building still has the heating system I installed 4 years ago. It runs perfectly and has not needed any major repairs. Frank jokes that I should offer an annual maintenance package, but I politely decline. I have had enough involvement with that building to last a lifetime. My relationship with the HOA is cordial now, professional even. I attend most board meetings, participate in community discussions, and even helped revise some of the bylaws to make them clearer and fairer. Frank jokes that I went from being the HOA's worst enemy to one of its biggest supporters, but that is not quite right. I was never the HOA's enemy. I was Patricia's enemy, Or rather, she was mine. The HOA itself, the concept of neighbors coming together to maintain common areas and community standards, that is fine. It is the people who abuse that power who are the problem. And now, with proper oversight and accountability, the chances of that happening again are much lower. This past Christmas, the community held a holiday party at the community building. The place was decorated beautifully, the heating worked perfectly, and about 200 residents showed up. There was food, music, a visit from Santa for the kids, the whole thing. It was the kind of event that brings a community together. I stood in that building, the same building that had been at the center of so much conflict just a year earlier, and watched families enjoying themselves. Kids were running around playing tag. Teenagers were taking selfies by the Christmas tree. Adults were chatting and laughing, and everything felt right. Frank came up beside me with a cup of eggnog. "Hard to believe this is the same place that was 45 degrees a year ago," he said. "Different leadership makes all the difference," I replied. "That it does. You know, I have been thinking about your situation a lot. What you did took guts. Most people would have just complained to their friends and paid the money." "I was angry," I said, "and stubborn. You were principled." "There is a difference." Maybe he was right. I like to think I would have done the same thing even if I had not been angry, but I cannot be sure. Sometimes anger is what motivates us to action when calm reasoning would tell us to just let things go. As I write this now, in February 2026, just over a year since this whole thing started, I am struck by how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. I still live in the same house, drive the same truck, own the same trailer. But the community around me is fundamentally different and better. The story of the Firewood trailer has become part of the neighborhood lore. New residents hear about it during the welcome meetings that the HOA now holds quarterly. It serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when HOAs overstep their authority and what happens when residents stand up for themselves. I received a letter last month from the Maryland Association of Community Managers, inviting me to speak at their annual conference about my experience and the importance of following proper procedures. I declined, politely. I have said everything I need to say about the situation, and I do not need to become a professional HOA reform advocate. But I did recommend Frank for the speaking slot, and he accepted. He is better at public speaking anyway, and as the current HOA president, he has more credibility on the topic of how to run an HOA correctly. My business continues to thrive. I am booked up with projects through the end of the year, doing custom cabinetry, trim work, and the occasional HVAC installation. I have hired 2 apprentices to help with the workload, young guys who are learning the trade and doing good work. Sarah and I are talking about getting engaged. We have been together almost a year now, and things are going well. She wants to move into my house when we get married, which is fine with me. She jokes that she wants to live in the house that started a revolution, which makes me laugh every time. The trailer sits in my backyard, usually loaded with firewood or tools, depending on the season. It has become such a fixture that I cannot imagine not having it, even though it caused so much trouble. It is a reminder that standing up for yourself matters, that principles are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the little guy really does win. Every time I drive past the community building, I think about that cold January night when I walked into the mechanical room and turned down the thermostat. It was a petty move, I will admit that, but it was also effective. It got people's attention, it forced a confrontation, and ultimately it led to positive change. Would I recommend that other people do the same thing if they are in a similar situation? Probably not. It was risky. It could have backfired spectacularly, and I got lucky that the investigation uncovered actual crimes. But I do recommend that people stand up for themselves when they are being treated unfairly. Document everything, and do not be afraid to get lawyers and the media involved when necessary. The Pine Ridge community today is a genuinely nice place to live. The HOA functions as it should, maintaining common areas and organizing community events without being intrusive or authoritarian. Property values have actually gone up since the leadership change, as word has gotten out that this is a well-managed, resident-friendly community. And me. I am just a guy who lives here, works hard, pays his dues, and keeps his firewood trailer in the backyard where it belongs. The firewood warrior has retired from active duty, content to live a quiet life and let other people fight the HOA battles. But if I ever see another HOA president trying to pull the kind of stunts Patricia did, I will not hesitate to speak up, because that is what good neighbors do. They look out for each other, they stand up to bullies, and they work together to build real communities based on mutual respect and cooperation. The trailer, the firewood, the cold snap, the heating system, all of it seems almost surreal now. But it happened, and it changed everything. It changed me. It changed the community, and in a small way, it changed the state of Maryland. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to keep his house warm during a cold snap. As winter turns to spring here in Maryland, I find myself reflecting on everything that happened and feeling grateful. Grateful that I had the resources to fight back. Grateful for neighbors like Frank who supported me. Grateful for attorneys like David Randolph and Zelda Wright who took my case seriously. And grateful for a legal system that, however imperfectly, ultimately delivered justice. The firewood from that infamous trailer has long since been burned. The warmth it provided during those cold January nights in 2025 is just a memory now. But the warmth of the community that came together in the aftermath of that conflict, that is something that will last for years to come. And that, more than anything else, is what makes the whole experience worth it. Not the vindication, not the reforms, not even the satisfaction of seeing Patricia face consequences for her actions. It is the community that emerged from the ashes of that conflict, stronger and more united than ever before. So if you are reading this and you are dealing with your own HOA nightmare, take heart. Document everything, stand up for yourself, and do not be afraid to fight back when you are being treated unfairly. It might be hard, it might be expensive, and it might take longer than you want, but it is worth it. Because at the end of the day, your home is your castle, and nobody has the right to treat you like a subject in their little kingdom. Not an HOA president, not a board of directors, nobody. You have rights, and those rights matter, fight for them. The end of this story is not dramatic. There is no final confrontation, no last-minute plot twist. Just a man living in his house, working at his job, loving his girlfriend, and enjoying his community. The trailer is in the backyard, the firewood is stacked neatly in the garage, and the community building is heated to a comfortable 68 degrees. Everything is as it should be. And if that seems anticlimactic after everything that happened, well, that is life. Most stories do not end with fireworks and dramatic music. They end with things returning to normal, just a slightly better version of normal than before. That is enough for me.